Welcome to Soonicorn Nation, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, brought to you by the Soonicorn Collective. My name is Mohammed Tariq, founder of Earth, and I have been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years.
And my name is Sharma, founder of Accendo Technologies, and I've been an entrepreneur for the last 17 years. The Soonicorn Collective is a peer-to-peer leadership and learning community for mature and growth stage entrepreneurs, while our in-person live engagements are exclusively for members only. We believe that knowledge gained and the lessons learned should be shared across wider ecosystems and society at large. And that is how this podcast was born. We hope these learnings will accelerate your entrepreneurial journey and perhaps pave your way to becoming Malaysia's next Soonicorn.
The opinions, views, and content expressed on the Soonicorn Nation podcast are those of the entrepreneurs and the guests featured, and do not reflect the official policies or positions of Proficio Consultants, Pinjana Capital, or the rest of the Soonicorn Collective. Today, it is my pleasure to have Sharma Lachu as my co-host and fellow entrepreneur. Welcome, Sharma.
Thank you very much for having me, Mo.
Before we jump into today's topic, how about we start with a quick recap of recent Soonicorn event. We both attended the talk by Creador founder Brahmal Vasudevan. He's the private equity investor behind successful companies such as Old Town White Coffee, Mr. DIY, and CETOS. Very impressive achievements, of course. But what did you think of it?
Well, this wasn't my first session with him, so it was very interesting to hear him speak about his journey this time around. I've had the pleasure of having him as a mentor in previous engagements. What I really liked this time, I thought, was getting into the mind of the person who decides what to buy, when to sell, and how they think about these things. We as entrepreneurs very rarely have that opportunity to have that exposure. So I thought that was interesting this time.
Because we are inside the business,
Correct.
So it's hard to get the bird's eye view. But did you notice that he wore pink?
Yes.
Yeah.
And for those of y'all who don't know what Mo is talking about, in different podcasts, I have spoken about the effects of pink shirt many times. But we'll leave it for that. Yes, the first thing I saw.
All right. So I'll give you a bit of honest feedback actually about this session. So I think it was my first time to listen to him speak, but it seemed like a well-rehearsed talk.
Yes.
So basically, after the session, I went back. I checked one of his podcasts that he did almost 5 years ago before COVID, and he actually said
Exactly
almost the same thing.
thing.
So, there was COVID, 2 wars, inflation crisis. So much has happened in 5 years, and the message is kind of still the same. So basically, what I felt was that he wasn't revealing everything. There was, of course, focus on triumphs and wins. If he was there trying to add another 50 people to his admiration community, then definitely he got a lot of applause.
Yes.
But where I was standing, I was actually looking for a way showing entrepreneurs how to battle it out in the world of business. A bit from the heart, some vulnerability, some maybe lessons learned, failures, something like that. That to me would have earned a standing ovation, not just applause.
Right.
So let's hope for maybe another session with him where we can get this kind of thing.
But maybe more. We think about it slightly differently. Maybe that's what this is for. This session here with us, you and us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure though if he would actually come and take the hot seat one day and
Maybe one day, yeah.
Yeah. So we should try. We'll definitely try that. So do you wanna recap what he said to entrepreneurs? I have a few lines here that I prepared, but what were the key learnings in your mind from the session, and then I will recap the
Sure.
rest.
Maybe I'll go off the cuff a little bit, right? So the general feedback, when you speak about Brahmal, is that he's a very tough guy to work with and all that. And you see, I think there's somewhat of a method to the madness, if I would to recall that process, right? And he had acknowledged this. He said, I am very tough to work with. But it's because I have a very clear purpose of what I'm trying to do. And I think that maniacal focus, what I transact from that process, right, is the maniacal focus required for success. A lot of people get into the hubris of entrepreneurship. Right? We like it because it's famous, it's fun. I get to sit in a podcast with you. Rockstar, right? The nerds now are taking over the rockstar world. And when 10, 20, 30 people come and say you're doing a good job, you can block that noise out. When 200, 300 people come and pat your back and say you're amazing, it gets to your head. And I think what I took from that is really the maniacal focus required to stay on course and drive to an execution result. I think that was, to me, the biggest outcome I took from that.
But have you ever had this kind of guy, for example, challenge you on your quarterly results?
Well, my partners are all from the financial industry right now. So, whilst not at Brahmal's level, I would still say I've had the privilege, and I genuinely believe that it's a privilege because I run the business on a day-to-day basis. I sometimes get clouded by the daily activities that are happening. And it is important for me, at least, to be able to have this bouncing board of people who don't always just buy into everything I say. So, whilst not at Brahmal's level, I think my partners are brilliant at doing this.
Great. So just for the listeners who weren't there at the session, I've just recapped very quickly. He emphasized the role of luck in his life. He also said that choosing the right partner to marry is also extremely important. When he was raising his first fund, because he didn't have a name yet, so he met 350 investors, 90% said no. He had to actually seed the fund with his own money in order for people to take him seriously. I think one of the key points that he was trying to urge entrepreneurs was to respect capital. So he actually said that he likes private equity more than venture capital because in private equity, most of the time, your investment usually doesn't go to zero. You can lose money, but it doesn't go to zero. Whereas in venture capital, that's the game. Some are going to go to zero, while some others are going to be massive success. So he generally stays away from that kind of investment. And then basically, when he's selecting talent, he chooses them from difficult backgrounds. He tries to pay them well, on par with the industry standard globally, not just locally, and also recognize their performance, give them interesting projects and things like that. He didn't think the media is covering successful entrepreneurs fairly sometimes. He actually shared a couple of stories of that, and he said that he actually had to call them out when they got the facts wrong. Of course, not everybody gets the privilege to do so. There are instances where entrepreneurs get attacked by the media, but they actually aren't listened to when they try to fight back. So that is something that we're trying to correct here. And then he commented a bit about his venture into peer-to-peer entrepreneurship communities. He said that he still would have liked to see more successes come out of those communities. And then that was actually interesting for me, and it connects to today's topic. He said that he tells his investee companies that 50% success rate in HR is expected. What do you think about that?
I don't subscribe to this. I have a different point of view. There are many ways to up that percentage, but there is his point of view.
Okay, so maybe today we can
deep dive into it a little bit.
Better result than 50%. But can we go a bit into your background?
Sure.
Okay. So entrepreneurial journey. Your entrepreneurial spirit started early in school, is it?
No, this was interesting. Right? So this was with a podcast with Kevin, right? That you're referring to. Yeah. I never thought about this before, right? So prior to that podcast, I had a interview with somebody else, and they had given me not a list of questions, but the way they wanted me to talk about these things. And I thought that was really interesting. So when they asked me to reflect back as to what do I think was one or two of the first things I did that ignited this journey, and I really had to go back. And these two examples I gave, one was during Sukma and one was selling banana chips, was really how I felt the passion started, right? Because you saw an opportunity, you could understand how to fix that process, figure out the supply chain, so as to speak, right? And that was how it all started for me. So.
And manage inventory as well, or how? Or
well, I outsourced inventory to my neighbor technically, right?
And did you get any free labor and your family help you out? Or?
No. I was the labor, which goes back to I think one of our topics today, right? About HR and managing talent. I was always the one that did all the dirty work.
So one of the key messages that you wanted to emphasize, I think, also during that interview was basically don't play the victim. Be better, and then you're gonna get the opportunities.
Yes. I grew up playing football, right? And I grew up playing football in a very small town. So I had constantly been told, sorry, Sharma, the Tok Penghulu son, the village chief son needs to play, so you need to step aside, and all these kind of things. And that I think built a level of resilience from a very young age. So you can either choose to play victim and go, oh, the world or the system's always against me. I was fortunate to just naturally be able to say, okay, maybe not this season, then the next season, I just need to be that much better to make sure that, when you choose the next person, I need to be that much better that you kicking me out makes you look stupid.
So you actually went to Sunway, and then after that graduated, took a normal job, right? You were
No, so from Kuantan, I finished my SPM. The day after I finished my SPM, and I think, and again, the way Brahmal said luck plays a part, to some extent, I genuinely believe luck plays a part. He spoke about other things playing a role as well. I also have a different view of that.
what, astrology or
Yes,
marriage or what?
astrology,
okay.
right? But again, he's entitled to his opinion. But when the day I finished SPM, my dad sent me to KL to work for my uncle, right? And that job was the most difficult job I had ever done in my life, right? And I'd done a lot of odd jobs here and there, and that was the job I think that made me or forced me to say I will never be a failure in life, because if this is what I have to come back to, I don't know, my uncle's company, Safety Net, right?
Safety Net, yeah.
Right. So, but if this was what I had to come back to, I was never going to do that, right? And again, the job wasn't bad; it was quite cool. We used to do fireworks, like industrial fireworks shows for large, your New Year fireworks and all that kind of stuff. But the work was painful, right? So I came straight after SPM, came to KL the next day, worked throughout my college years with him, and then moved to Australia. I was in Melbourne first, and then I moved to Sydney, and then I graduated in Sydney, and then I started working there. And I worked for a psychometric tool provider who, in all their wisdom, decided that the Asia HQ was going to be out of Sydney.
So do you think that it makes you a better entrepreneur that you actually had a regular job before switching into entrepreneurship? Or do you think that sometimes it's okay to just fresh start as an entrepreneur?
No, I don't think having a job or not is the prerequisite. I think having pain or not is the prerequisite. Because if you grow up without really feeling pain or really and Jensen Huang, right, now speaks about it, and everyone now thinks it's a great thing, right? I think in Stanford interview he said this, right? I wish pain upon all of y'all. And I genuinely believe that. Right? So if you've not felt pain, I'm not saying it's not good. It's just that it doesn't build resilience in most people. And you being able to break through that pain barrier and go through and still be willing to put your head down and work is a huge advantage later on. And I think that is a prerequisite. So find pain first before you go do something.
Find pain because that stretches you from inside, that increases your resilience.
I believe so.
So you started as Arcane Solution, which was a consulting business. In a consulting business, you kind of can be cash flow positive from day one, right?
Yes.
You can start the business with a client and then you just have to pay your salaries from the project, right? So did those consulting years allow you to mature first in the business world before you then take the burden of high growth?
Definitely. And I will also be honest. So in today's podcast, what I don't want to do is pretend to have this hero persona, right?
Yeah. We're not romanticizing.
Yes.
Actually, that's the point of the podcast.
Correct, right? I think too many of us buy into this hubris of look at us, we're superheroes, we're trying to change the world. And I think what I don't want to do today is to try and say the success or whatever this journey has been thought out from the beginning and I had a plan. Absolutely not, right? So when we started Accendo Solutions was it. We didn't plan for Accendo, right? We were doing a lot of work and a lot of great support came through from there. And there was a natural growth journey that took place from that environment. And this goes back to selling banana chips. If you can identify the opportunities and be able to take a little bit of risk and say, hang on a minute, I do this, I get 100,000. But if I just do a little bit more outside my current comfort zone, I may get 3, 4, 500,000. Should I try that? And that's how we naturally grew through a place where we then started developing our own technology. In 2018, we started this process, right? So from 2007 to 2018, we are a pure consulting firm, doing a lot of work for clients, large enterprise clients across the region, which was also not what I thought would happen. Right? So when I first came back from Australia, I would have thought, the BCGs of the world, the McKinseys of the world would be who these large organizations wanted to work with. We would typically go and do consulting for smaller organizations. That wasn't the case, right? So I had to now rethink of the model. If you're now starting to serve large enterprise organizations, what does that mean? The kind of people you hire because of that also differs, right? So all these things happened to us, and the ability to respond to it, not react to it, was, I think, important in our growth.
I do want to ask you about the moment when you were hired as a consultant. You did a lot of hard work to pin down who was the right candidate for a succession of a specific position.
The pink shirt.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then everything that you did get paid probably, so no worries there. But basically, they just flushed your work down the toilet because someone thought that it's improper to wear a pink shirt. So tell us a bit about that. How did you feel, actually?
Sure. Maybe as a preamble, then let me tell the story. Right. So throughout our consulting journey, we've been very privileged to work with really mature organizations, and we were doing very well at a certain point. At one point in our consulting journey, we were, as Arcane Solutions, our Accendo Human Resource Technologies in Brahmal, we were Malaysia's biggest local consulting firm, right? So very happy. I think there was about 9-10 of us, very small outfit, doing some interesting work. So we got this piece of work from a client. We'll not mention the client name. Large, huge organization, many billions of dollars, right? In terms of turnover. So they came in and they said, look, we're looking for succession planning for our CFO. So, okay, we go in the traditional way of doing this. You go in as consultants, you do a lot of assessments, you interview the candidates, you complete all this work, and then you have to do a presentation to the board. So we went in, we're doing this presentation, 3-hour-long presentation, 7 candidates. They've highlighted one that they feel they like. Now, meeting's over. So we agreed that this person gets the job. Now, before we leave, I have to ratify that decision. Right? So board meeting, 9% board, I'm going through the process. So 6 people have to say yes, plus the chairman. I'm going through person 1, person 2, person 3. I think person 5 says yes. Before person 6 says yes, the chairman says in passing, don't you think something's not right with this person? He wears pink all the time. Right? And at that point, it took me aback a little bit. And I'm going, what's that got to do with the job? I wear pink. There's nothing wrong. You were alluding to Brahmal wearing pink that day. Right? And because the chairman said that, one by one, you'd see the board members going, yeah, actually, if you think about it, right, during this engagement, this person didn't do that well. And just like that, 2 people took their votes out. And the moment that happened, the person didn't get the job, and the person didn't get the job, right? But as they were leaving the board meeting, they were saying, oh, that was a really stupid decision. We knew this person was really good. I said, guys, but you were the one who decided. And they looked at me and said, Sharma, you're either stupid or naive. You know what that meant, right? And you go, okay. And I think at that point, and you're right, we got paid very, very well for that, right? But at that point, I think what was important was us going back to our hypothesis, right? So I don't want to get all fluffy here, but from day one, our hypothesis has been simple, right? To be able to give people the opportunity to be the best versions of themselves at work. Now, if I wanted to do that as a consultant, I was affecting maybe 10, 15 companies a year, right? We then felt we had to repaint the tapestry of what we wanted to do. Whilst I don't think I was personally hurt by that process, because I've seen similar things happen through the 10 years, 12 years of consulting. You don't expect people to take your decision, right? Your job is to be able to provide. But
you weren't allowed to actually remind them of your research and your process?
So we had that conversation. Yeah, we had that conversation, right? I can't mention too much, right? But the conversation was had. But at that point, we realized, look, the best way for us to propagate our journey, our hypothesis, is that the journey needs to be different, right? As a consulting firm, nothing wrong with consultants, but I think, like Brahmal was saying, right, you spend too much time in consulting, you learn not to do anything well. But consulting wasn't the way we thought we were going to do anything great. So we said, look, if our hypothesis is true, if the two things we wanted to solve, which in Accendo is managing for implicit biases that people make and reducing invisible leakage, if these were the two things that we wanted to solve, then the model in which we deliver the solution can no longer be consulting, right? So that's what kind of drove us into saying, if this is how people take the work we do, then we need a different mode of delivery. So,
But I'm actually wondering about one thing, because I don't think you ever in the early days had a customer who told you, you know what, Sharma, I really need a solution for my biases.
No.
So you had to have already some level of authority in the market to actually sell this to your customers and they would really use it. So it doesn't sound like that was the first thing you started with. You probably started with something that was more in compliance with their regular process and then slowly evolved into this.
No. So my background into psychometrics was because of the biases I felt throughout my life, right? So whether it came from football or job interviews or whatever happened, the worst thing that happened, I won't say the worst thing, but the most painful thing that happened to me, I'm an absolute car person. I love my cars, right? So after graduation...
What did you drive here?
We'll forget about
Okay.
that. But absolutely.
I was waiting for Bugatti Veyron or something.
Investors would be too happy. No, I don't. Right, but let's say, so after graduation, I really wanted to work for car companies, right? So I was in Sydney. I applied to 27 different car companies, right? And for each one of them, I wrote, well, I won't say a thesis paper, but I wrote a document about what I found as their public strategy and how I thought I could help for each one. So I wrote 27 different papers and got some interviews here and there, right? One called me, first level interview, second level interview. At the third interview, when I met the regional manager, he said, Sharma, I really like you, but I'm sorry, you're not Australian enough. That hurt. Right? Because you grow up in Malaysia and let's not mask around things, right? But you grow up in Malaysia and you know how to maneuver things. And the fallacy is that, oh, this is only a Malaysia thing. Nothing happens outside the world. And you go out there and you see things like this happen. You go, hang on a minute, this is not a Malaysia problem. This is a global problem, right? And I'm not saying I'm so great, but what he said, I'm sorry, you're not Australian enough. Right? And when that got me sitting down with my manager, and I was working part-time while studying, I was talking to him about this, and he said, have you thought about people measurement, right? Talent measurement as a function? And then I went and explored that as a process, and that's how I got into the whole space of psychometrics, and then learned that psychometrics predominantly really is about trying to eliminate biases in people decision making. So at the back of our minds, this was always the thing that we wanted to solve for, but you can't go and tell people this. Right? So we mask it in things that you speak about, hiring, talent development, whatever. But at the back of it has always been about managing for implicit biases.
Okay. Does the black box of AI that has recently become in demand, does that allow you to hide a bit of the things that you wanted to present and then, kind of pin it on the AI as the AI says this, the AI says that?
No. So actually in Accendo, I won't try and sell Accendo too much here, right? But in Accendo, the model we take is a glass box model, right? Because at no point are we trying to pretend that we know all the answers. And so I always say when somebody comes in and talks about their AI and you question their AI and they say, oh, sorry, it's a black box, that's a big red flag, right? Because if you're not willing to speak about your AI models and how it was built and what's the parameters and how the algorithm works, you're making the assumption that you are the end of that knowledge sphere, right? I think at no point are we pretending to do that. We want to work with clients. In fact, just recently, last week, I had a presentation to a client whose question to me was, are you willing to open up your glass box for me to go in and add more information? I said, look, the glass box is there for everyone, right? You can't just blindly add, but we can replicate it, work with it, see if the hypothesis works, and then enhance the algorithm accordingly. But no, we try not to hide anything behind it. We want to be able to stand behind the science of what we do. And because we are essentially a behavioral psychology-based technology firm, we have to have that level of rigor, right? So I think...
But I don't think, for example, Sam Altman can answer you specifically about every single answer coming from ChatGPT. Like AI is inherently mysterious, right? You train the model and then you don't know what are the outputs gonna be. So let me just stop for a second here, and before we go deeper into talent and so on, because that's the topic of the episode actually. But one of the things that I caught from you speaking and also Brahmal is the importance of people who are ahead of you, who believe in you and give you a chance. He spoke about a billionaire who basically gave him a loan to go to Harvard. You also spoke about 3 people that were instrumental in taking a bet on you. How does an entrepreneur in the early days meet such people actually? Is it a competition, or like how do you meet them?
No, I think Accendo, or at least me, I'm a supporter of Manchester United, so I think maybe inherently I've got this behavior. We do things the hard way. This were just cold calls, meetings after meetings after meetings. I used to be chased out of rooms, right? Because some young kid coming and telling a really seasoned business person how to manage their people. And I used to get sentences like, "I've been working longer than you've been alive." So you just go through that, right? And if you survive long enough, and I think that really is the case, right? I don't think we were so special that our ideas were so new that everyone wanted to listen to us, but we just kept turning up. We just kept turning up. You kick me out.
So it's playing the numbers game.
Yeah. No, but even to the same person.
Okay.
I will still keep turning up, right? I remember a client who said, "Bloody hell, what do I need to do to get you out of my space?" I said, "There's nothing you're going to do, right? You can say no to me 100 times. I'll turn up 101. And I think either they break or they get convinced, right? So something happens in that process. So I think the 3 people that you spoke about, Vignesh, he's now the regional head of HR at SOS. Datin Bardunisa, who's now a board member, Bilal is now doing something with startups, right? These are all people who you do something with them, and you do something small, and you do it right, and you're willing to experiment. And I think the intellectual curiosity from both parties is important. You can't just want to sell, you can't take this and say, baila, right? I think that doesn't work.
Sell this pen.
Right? But because you're trying to experiment things, because your ideas are interesting, then they're willing to engage with you and see. So I don't think it's special. I don't think, and today, the good thing I feel is there are these competitions. There are these networks, whether it's Soonicorn, whether it's Endeavor, whether it's Panjana, all these things are being set up. So younger entrepreneurs don't have to walk through stone to get through to these processes. I think that's an advantage they have. But I also feel that's the negative impact because it's so easy now, right? It's easier now, right?
You still have to execute.
Correct, right? But that's all you have to do, right? You don't have to go through the shame of getting told not to do anything.
But do you think entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley have to trial and error 100 times?
No, of course.
They walk into a Starbucks and they
Correct.
get advice from fellow entrepreneurs. So
I don't know if you've heard of this story I shared once, right? So through the Panjana process, we were taken to the Silicon Valley last year, right? So we had a pitch with a VC. We finished that pitch. And then a whole bunch of all the guys that were coming with us were pitching. So my partner and I walked out and we went to Joe and the Juice, something,
local
cafe just along the road. We're sitting down and we're doing some work and talking. 2 random people just turned up to us and go, "Hey guys, what are you working on?" I look at him and go, "Oh, just doing some stuff." Because we're not used to this in Malaysia, right?
If someone asks me what I'm going to do, who are you?
Exactly, right? And I just looked at him and said, "Oh, we're just doing some work." I said, "Oh, where are you from? What do you do?" And we got into the conversation and I started presenting Accendo and Talent Pulse and what we do. And he was telling me, "Oh, I think you haven't thought about these things. These are all the other things that you need to think about." Finished 10 minutes and he walked away, right? That's what's different, right? I don't see entrepreneurs willing to sit and have that conversation today. Whether it be the hero complex or whether it just be, I think if I tell you my idea, you're going to steal my idea, whatever the reason, right? But like you said, execution trumps any idea, right? So I can tell you everything, but if you don't know how to execute or you're not willing to execute as hard as I can, then it means nothing. So to that point, I thought that was really, really eye-opening for me in terms of, whilst we talk about trying to replicate the Silicon Valley, whilst we talk about trying to replicate ecosystems, it's these behaviors that we need to try and imbue into these ecosystems.
You explained well biases and how tools can help you against those biases, but you didn't go deep enough into invisible leakages. So, what is an invisible
Sure.
leakage?
So the way we define, so Accendo defines invisible leakage by the delta between where you are supposed to be when you get a job versus where anyone typically is, right? And there are many reasons why that delta is available. The good reason is because I want to promote you into a job and you can learn how to get there, right? The more malicious reasons are all the biases. But the point being, not many organizations or people understand the gap. Right? And because I allow that gap to stay for a very long time, you make suboptimal decisions in your tenure during that time, right? And those suboptimal decisions really, really have a negative impact. Right?
I've had an experience fairly recently where one of my superstars simply got offered by an international company 4 to 5 times as much pay as I can afford, or as much as he's getting now. I could raise it a bit, but not to that level. And he likes the job in every way, but he has some obligations
Of
and
course.
he has no choice. So sometimes you can still have someone who's totally happy, but they would still leave for the money.
Oh,
Right?
my
Is there a solution for that, or
no. I think, but I look at it slightly differently, right? Because I look at it as, working with me is like making a movie, right? Hollywood and the movie industry has had this process for a very long time. Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio, and a few of these people come together very often.
yeah, collective
right?
wisdom? They build collective wisdom.
And they build things that are amazing, right? That last generations. Then they go away. They do other things. And then when the next thing happens, they come back together and they do it again and it becomes bigger and better. And I think if we take that same mindset, then perhaps it is not on us. Right? It's not a reflection of us or the company. If you've left now and if someone can offer you 4 or 5 times, then I think our journey as entrepreneurs is to figure out how do we get to the place where the next base salary can be 4 or 5 times more. And if that happens, then we can bring this person back. If you still believe that that's the right person at that point, this person will join. If he likes what you do, if he likes the company, believes in the process, and money is the only thing, I feel it's the easiest thing to solve. It's always when people join you only for the money that I find is the most difficult thing to manage.
Yeah, good point. So you're clearly very passionate about making talent feel good at work, and you feel that feeling good at work actually has societal implications. Tell us a bit about the bully research.
Yes, I'm still looking for it. I owe the BFM host, Richard Bradbury, the research. So many years ago, I was listening to a talk and they cited the research and then I went and read the research. And that research was talking about if both parents need to be unhappy at work, right? If both parents are unhappy at work, the odds that the child becomes a bully at school increases by 30%.
In the future. So basically,
So they're raising the bully in school.
They're raising the bully,
right?
right.
And the research was talking about because you become a lot more frustrated when you come back home. You become a lot more snappy when you come back home. You just want to switch off. You don't want to spend the time with the kid. And all this impacts the kid. And I used to be a young parent when I read that research, right? And that was another trigger for me to be able to say, look, we now live, and we can't ignore this, right? But we now live in a world, in a society, where work is predominantly the most important thing that defines who you are. Right, wrong, that's a whole other podcast, right? But that's the world we live in today. So people are doing everything possible to align to that process. And that has a huge detrimental impact to everything else. There was a really nice video. I think if you Google this now, you can find it. Trevor Noah interviewed Simon Sinek, right? And he asked, what's the latest thing you're working on? And he says, friendship. And he says, why friendship? And they go on to this whole host of things. But one of the things that I picked up from there, he said, look, what has happened is in this world that we live in, people are becoming less spiritual. People are becoming less or very individualistic and all of these things because inherently as people, we are a collective, right? Because we no longer have all these different places to go get our validation in different environments, we put all the burden into the work. Work has to be the place we find purpose. Work has to be the place we find friendship. Work has to be, now work has become everything. And that burden cannot sustain, right? It will break. So I think that's where a lot of my passion comes from when I think about work, when I think about how structures of work need to be. Sometimes I overthink about these things, but yes, I am very, very passionate about this.
So I think it's time to talk about Talent Pulse. That is your flagship
The product, yes.
What is it all about?
Right. So Talent Pulse essentially is a talent intelligence platform. It's a product that sits on top of organizational systems. The idea is to be able...
So you have to have something internal first.
Yeah. Because we predominantly work with enterprise clients, right? So it's a system that sits on top of other systems. Somebody called me the remora fish, the fish that swims with the whales and the shark, right? But the idea is, as a data function, how do we sit on top of different environments? And we only do three things, right? The ability to diagnose individuals. And we do that by two functions, passive and active data. Active data being, your typical psychometrics, profiling, so on and so forth. Passive data, and this is something I'm really, really passionate about, is data that's already available out there. Within organizational systems, within work systems, your own personal systems. And how do we now bring all of these things together to be able to identify who you are as a fuller individual, right? Not just what your KPI was last year, what your performance rating was last year. Performance rating, performance management as it's done today, has been identified as the single most biased way to measure an individual, right? Because managers are never trained well enough on how to manage this process. They do it once, twice a year. And the recency theory or latency theory, recency theory means you can be rubbish for 11 months of the year, but the last month you were amazing. That's all I think about, right? Or you've done something in January that was so amazing, and for 11 months after that, you've never done anything, but I still remember that part. All these things come into the biases of people's decision making. So how do we now find smarter ways to measure holistically who you are as an individual? Number one. Number two is, what does a job mean to you? Today, when you and today with ChatGPT, it's a lot easier, but when you and I used to write job descriptions, the typical way people do this, and we think only you and I, trust me, even the biggest organizations do this, right? Go Google job description for this, and then I take the top three, kind of thing. I've seen job descriptions that are 3 pages long. I've seen job descriptions that are 4 lines long, right? It's a function of artistic writing. But if you can't define what the job is, you start looking for Superman. Right? I got the 17 things I need of this. Nobody has this kind of capability.
Olympic world champion 17 times and right. Speak 19 languages.
And because of your lack of clarity of what is important for the job, you always go through this, I can't find the right person, or it's so difficult, and all the kind of stuff. So the ability to measure individuals, ability to then benchmark them against what good is supposed to look like. And then when you overlay these two people, what is the command center that gets created for the individual to enhance themselves, for their manager to know what to do with them, and for organizations to align people to strategy? That's all we do.
So I heard someone tell me a quote by Sharma that if you're going to go through the trouble of opening your business in another country, why choose a neighboring country? Why can't you just go for US or Europe or something like that? Did you actually say that?
Yeah, somewhat, right. So the idea of growth very often is, because you've won in one country, that you think you can start growing anywhere, right? So to me, growth is a function of identifying the right to play and the right to win. Just because you're good in Malaysia, you're good in Indonesia. So we do work today in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, India, Europe, a little bit here and there, right? But just because we've got presence there doesn't mean we can win that market. So being able to identify what is the right to win, right? So if we can identify that, it really doesn't matter where you're going, right? You're able to solve this problem, I feel, so at least for my business, right? I feel the work we do is universal. It's not a region-specific problem. This is universal. So instead of Indonesia, are you thinking of India first and then thinking of between India, Indonesia, and then you're looking at India, why not China? If you're going through all this trouble as a SaaS technology product, US is the holy grail. And it's not the holy grail because, it's this wonderland. It's the holy grail because people understand how to buy technology. It's the holy grail because people respect technology. And they're willing to pay for that.
Yeah, there is Fortune 500,
Right.
and most of them are US companies. They can pay.
So a lot of these technology firms that are unicorns very quickly are hardly outside of the US, right? So if that's the process, then are we constantly challenging ourselves to go there and see what is required? So it's not that I don't think it's easier to go to a neighboring country than it is to the US. It's always to be able to find the right to play and the right to win.
Because you define success as impacting the maximum
As
number
many
of people,
companies
right?
as possible.
Companies or individuals?
But the way I think about it is B2B2C, right? So if I impact the most number of companies, I impact the most number of people.
Right. Okay. So what about financial metrics? How do you actually price your products? I mean, most of your customers are big companies, so they obviously can afford, they have a budget for HR, or are you usually getting paid out of the HR budget or some other budget?
It depends who and what we sell for, right? So if we sell typically to HR people, then yes, it's the HR budget. But if we go out and sell to the CEO as an organizational transformation process, then it comes out of the CEO budget. So very, very different projects.
Okay. Do you mind if we spend the rest of the episode trying to craft what you're good at to startups? Because so far, everything we have said only applies for big companies. Let
Yes.
me give you an example. Bias. If you're a startup entrepreneur, very scruffy, no resources, right? You actually don't have much bias because you're going to work with whoever will show up to work. And you also don't have invisible leakage because you don't have a team.
Yep.
So let's actually get started on that journey.
Yes, let's go.
How do you build a founding team on a budget? And don't tell me call your friends. I mean, I know
No.
you started with your friends, but there must be a process to it.
No, actually, I didn't start with friends. My partners are my good friends, but we didn't start the team that way. And again, let me put the disclaimer out there. Everything I'm saying, I'm only saying through my experience. I don't believe I know the answer to this. I'm just sharing my journey, right? The best piece of advice, Mo, I got was from a chap called Venugopal Nambiar. He runs a construction firm, right? So a very unlikely place to get technology advice, right? But this was the best advice I got. Love what you do more than the pain it is ever going to cause you, right? Because otherwise, don't start this. And he's given me his story about how and why this came through. But I think that set the tone for me. So when I started this thing, what was for 2 years? It was a single man company, right? So whilst I had partners, my partners were in Australia and doing different things. So in Malaysia, I was the only one running the show, right? So I was doing everything. I was the sales guy, I was the accountant, I was the guy looking for office. So for 2 years, I was the only one. Our very first person who joined as a part-timer, right? The first person joined as a part-timer. She came back from Melbourne. She was a friend of one of our partners. She was going to start up a spa. When she came back with her family, she said, "Hey, I've only got 3 months. Sort something out with me." I said, "Okay, we're running this project." In fact, it was the exact project that Vignesh from Astro gave us, right? We were trying to deploy that and we didn't have the kind of people to do it. And then we just tried to figure this out. So she joined for 3 months. She stayed for 7 years.
Wow.
So I think the way I started building this process is I am genuinely passionate about this product. And so are you. I hear you speak about what you do and it's amazing. But when you are passionate about something, you are able to go out and maybe to some extent, at least for the first few people, hope that that passion is enough, right? And then I got 2, 3, 4 people who that was the case initially, right? Who would be with me whilst they know he really doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but has some impact of doing this. So over the first 4 or 5 people that worked in Accendo, I genuinely believe were people who bought into the passion, who bought into the hypothesis, and bought into the problem, right? I maybe I wasn't as tactical about going out and looking for people who had difficult backgrounds and things like that. But I knew if you joined for the passion, you would stay for the journey, right? So the first 4 people joined us purely based on that. And they all stayed quite some time. I People outside have a view of Accendo. There's a reverse problem. People in Accendo stay for a very long time. Right? This 2-year, 3-year journey that doesn't really happen in Accendo. Touch.
That's great.
We're very lucky. We're very lucky.
I
Right?
need to intern at you guys to see how the HR works.
Oh well, maybe not now. But what I then believe is if you do that and you are genuinely vulnerable, and again I say this because I really do not subscribe to this hero mentality of a startup founder, right? If you are willing to go and say, guys, I also really don't know what this project is about. Can we figure this out together? Right? Okay, fine. I will turn on my Australian accent a little bit when I go to the client. I'll do the presentation. Don't worry. But can we figure this out together? You see a mode that turns on with this people. And what I find, or at least when we started all those years back, 2010 was when I think we started hiring people. Right? We started in 2007, 2008, 2009 was just me. 2010, we started hiring people. These were all very, very young people. Very, very young, right? And that was the counter problem we had. As a consulting firm, we didn't have gray hair. People didn't trust us for that, right? We didn't have the gray hair capital that is required in consulting. So, which meant we couldn't do consulting the traditional way, right? So the way we had to think about consulting had to be very out there and
embed yourself in the other organization.
No, not just about that. Just the solutions we came up with had to be, this wasn't what we were expecting, guys. We go, yeah, exactly. So give us 3 more minutes to explain why. And you got into it a little bit. And a lot of people said, this is absolutely stupid. Well, what kind of things, if I hired an X company, A company, B company, whatever it is, this is the outcome we'll come with, but the outcome is a 50-slide PowerPoint. What good is that, right? Let us deploy this process and you'll see what they are. And that passion kind of led to us or clients self-selecting working with us, right? And someone said this once at a conference. If you're looking for a company that will give you good structure, give you good project management, good update calls, absolutely don't work with Accendo. So this was many years back, right? Now we are a lot more structured. But if you want a company that will solve your problem, I've not found one better. And we didn't pay this person to say this, right? This person was presenting something. And that was our mantra for a very long time, right? The solutions we came up with had to be really interesting. And that, I think, got people who were working with us, that 4 or 5 people, because for a very long time, we were a very small company, right? We were, I think, at our consulting peak, only about 13, 14 people, right? And these 5 started going out and bringing their friends in, right? I genuinely believe birds of a feather flock together. Right? So if you are able to hire the first 3 or 4 that really align to you, that really are willing to fight, bleed for you, they then go out and do the rest of the work.
So it sounds a bit like culture.
Yes, I'm very careful when I say culture because, I am not someone who believes in writing something up the wall and putting it up there. I believe
but culture inside,
internally,
not
correct,
on the wall.
Correct, right. So I believe culture is something you do at the most difficult time, not the easiest of time, right? So yes.
So is it so that in the beginning you are more inclined to hire the type who is like sort of jack of all trades, master of none, the generalist who can do multiple hats, wear multiple hats at the same time, no real specialization, is it so?
I think so.
Or
right?
what is the right time to actually start thinking differently that you actually need specialization?
Okay. So correct. Initially, a lot of my team were generalists, right? And these were guys who've come from larger organizations who were really able to buy into this logic of, I hate this term, or this is not in my job description. Right? The moment I hear that, I know you can't fit the place we were, right? Then Alex Ferguson has this book with Michael Mortis, the partner at Sequoia, right? I think it's called Leadership. It talks about the 7 traits of leadership that he believes drove him to success. And in that book, he speaks about the refreshing of a team every 4 to 5 years, right? So his aim is at least in 2 cycles. When I look back, there's nobody in the team that should be there who was there 5-6 years ago. And that is the model I kind of take to some extent. 2 things happen to you, right? You either, when you hire a small group of people, very young, very as a startup, right? Either they are willing to grow with you or they drop off, right? Because the company has grown too far, and you will hear things like, oh, this place is no longer like what it used to be. And Accendo used to have this problem, right? We used to have 2-hour, 3-hour lunches because we used to do everything together. We'd stay up till 10, 11, 12, 2 o'clock in the morning and come back at 8 in the morning for work. So we'd take this pleasure of 2-hour lunches, 3-hour lunches. And then as the company started growing, you would see some fall off and some say, come, let's take this next journey. Right? And we had 3 or 4 iterations of this process. And at every point, I think the first question I ask myself is, am I still the right person to lead the organization in this next iteration? If I'm not, and I openly say this to my team, right? The CEO chair is always up for grabs. If there's anybody in the organization, and I constantly look for this, right? Who I think can take on that role, I put them there. We've done this twice, right? So when I've been away for 3-4 weeks, I've put in someone. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they absolutely hated it. But I do this. I openly say to everyone in the organization, the CEO chair is there for everyone. Just because I'm the founder does not mean I need to be the CEO. Right? And I think that's an important thing to understand, because the CEO job actually is not as fun as we all make it to be, right? It's a very administrative process. You are the chief cheerleader. You've got to make sure things happen, as opposed to the glamour of the founder. And I think we intertwine the glamour of the founder with the job of the CEO. And that's why everybody wants to become the CEO. So I think if you are willing to and be honest enough to say, look, before I make that iteration, because it's easy to say you are not ready for the journey with me, so I'm letting you go. It's difficult to say, maybe I'm also not ready for this, right? And I think every time you ask that question, and there will be a time when I strongly believe maybe I'm no longer the right person, I need to step down. And the day I believe that, I will make sure my succession planning kicks in very, very quickly.
Would you do this, peacetime CEO versus wartime CEO? Would you ever do this in wartime?
I think this has to be done anytime. I think the only difference is at wartime, you are willing to bleed more than anybody else. Yeah. Right? Like a professional CEO may look at the job and go,
I'm the last one.
Right? The founder has no other choice. But you must have that culture from the beginning, right? Till today. And I'm only saying this because we're talking about talent and culture. I still wash dishes in the sink that are not mine, right? That are not mine. So I'll walk to the kitchen, I'll see people leaving things there. Yes, we have a kakak that comes and cleans the office. But come on, you use dishes, clean up your dishes, right? And I still do that. I still water the plants. We just moved into a new office. The toilet bowl, it was a shared toilet. The toilet bowl was dirty. Yeah. The seat, right, was old. I went to DIY, bought the seat, went and changed it. The team looked at me walking into the office with toilet seat and then some screwdriver and some gloves. Like, what the hell are you doing? Right? But you've got to be able to say, look, I'm not any more special than you are. We are in this together. If you have that as a process, as a culture, then this wartime environment works, because then people believe you will bleed before me. If you push your troops to go and fight before you, then I don't think it works. Are you willing to go and fight first? Are you willing to bleed first? And then they come and follow you.
But this sounds like you are going to be called for firefighting often.
For small projects.
You don't believe in flat structure with autonomous teams, and then, like, for example, when there's a fire in sales department, let the head of sales handle it first. Only if he can't do it, then he comes to me.
Absolutely. But
because if you're called for every fire, then
Yeah.
when are you going to do strategy?
So no, what I mean by you go first is not that you get called for everything, is that you are willing to be the one who is most vulnerable first. You are the one who goes out and says, I will bleed for this first, right? So during COVID, for example, we made the difficult decision that once everybody else were firing staff and it became acceptable to reduce your payroll burden, that we were not going to do that, right? Now, it's easy to say we're not going to do that, but that also meant that I had to be the first to not take a salary, right? So for 2 years, I almost didn't take a salary a day, right? And that was an extremely painful decision to make. But then when it cascaded down to the next team, right, they then said, no, but the boss had already not taken the salary for 6 months. Only now he's coming and asking us, right? So that's what I mean, right? So are you willing to be the first to suffer before you expect that of others? And this is something my chairman in Australia taught me this, right? Don't expect of others what you're not willing to do for yourself, right? So that's the first thing. In terms of structure, I think I sometimes overdo it. I give too much autonomy to people. I have the view that if I've hired you, that means I've trusted you. You've got absolute control. And if I only when I see results not kicking, then I decide whether I keep or fire you. Sometimes I think I need to find that balance also. But no, it's not me coming to every solution process. I think in one of the Soonicorn sessions, I'd said this, right? My current leadership team constantly looks at me like, what the hell is wrong with this guy, right? And I think it's because I also try to hire, right? And this is my hiring strategy, right? At every point, the people I keep closest to me are people that are at least 18, 24 months ahead of the company. So sometimes I have to balance the logic that they may be bought today, but it's because they're not brought in for today. They are brought in for 18 to 24 months from now, right? I have to keep making sure they understand that as a process. And I always want to be, I feel, right? Maybe I'm a sucker for pain, but I want to be the stupidest among that leadership group. Because if I am the smartest, then that's the wrong leadership group, right?
Okay, so this takes me back to our Soonicorn session. I often look at you during our circles, and I can, first of all, you listen very carefully to everything that's going on. You always look like you have something on your mind, but you rarely speak. Is that a reflection of how you are at Accendo?
I never am the one who speaks first.
Is it because you think that you want to learn from whoever is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is also because I am a very introvert person, very, right? Clinically introvert. The posturing I do is because my job requires me to be all customer
you have a very
facing.
good stage persona, by the way.
Right.
I saw that.
All that comes from purely a lot of practice,
Yeah.
right? And it really saps a lot out of me. So I'm always naturally very quiet. I'm not the one who talks a lot. But I think from a work perspective, it has been something I do from the beginning. Even when I used to work, right? We'll walk into a room, I always want to hear everybody else's point of view first before I make mine. Because I never believe that my point of view is absolute. It's important for me to now say, look, I've come in with a point of view. Let me see if anybody else has anything better to say that allows me to change my point of view. And it's never wrong to change your point of view in the presence of better data, in the presence of better argument, right? So I'm always very quiet. I absorb as much as I can. And then if there's a necessity to present, I speak. This is a criticism I get a lot in the office. People prepare a nice presentation, all that kind of stuff. And I never speak through the presentation. They go, Sharma, we don't know what you're thinking. I go, you don't need to, right? You've presented your point of view. Now
Let me process
it. And I'll come back to it, right? But yeah, so it's just maybe just a natural way I process information.
Should startup entrepreneurs hire more risk takers or risk averse people?
Oh, 100% risk takers.
And if everybody is risk takers?
I think I'm talking about the first few.
Yeah.
I'm talking only about the first few.
Like
right?
first five,
first five,
10?
yeah, first five, right? Who are you to think you've got an idea that works, right? You and I, or at least me, I'd be arrogant to believe that what I'm thinking about makes absolute sense and that everybody in the world is going to buy my product, right? So you're going to need people as crazy to be able to say, let's try this out, right? And then structure kicks in, process kicks in. All that will come eventually, but I think the first 5 that you're talking about has to be as crazy as you are.
Do you remember when we had the session with the CEO of PayNet?
Yes,
And then
Farhan.
and then he was like, I admire you all douchebags. You all think whatever you're doing is the best thing in the world, and that's
Exactly.
there is a bit of madness in that, right? When would be the time to throw the towel on something that doesn't actually work with your in-house team, and then decide that, okay, I really need to outsource this, or I really need to, like for example, in my company right now, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I have previously, in one of my previous venture-backed startups, like blown $3 million into a tech stack, which was way advanced, very expensive. And then when we didn't have market share, we didn't have proper product market fit. In the end, it just ended up being a burden, right? And like it reminds me of like 15 other companies during the early days of Grab that also had proprietary ride hailing
Yep.
software, and because they have zero market share, they all don't exist today. So how do you decide which functions to keep internally and which functions you should outsource?
The decision we made early on is anything that is required to make the customer happy, we want to have absolute control over, right? I have a culture, call it whatever you want. But there's a term that people who work closely with me will know, right? It is called amaze everyone. Mm. And that logic to me is every interaction with somebody, you must try and amaze the person. Because if you think about it from a vendor perspective, you're not the only vendor going in and talking to the customer. The customer is sitting and meeting 30, 40, 50 people who all say they can do the greatest work possible for you, right? And you turn up. What is that one thing that you're going to say that's going to leave that person going, I want to meet this person again, right? So we always try and because that is something I genuinely believe in, I've found that when I can control that environment, I try and control that environment as tightly as I can. All things outside of that process, let it happen through natural processes, right? So whether you have to outsource it, whether you work with a consultant, whether you work with third-party providers, all that we let go. From day one, when we decided we were going to build Talent Pulse, the first thing I did was to go and hire a CTO, right? And that was our pivot from professional services into
Technology.
product, right? And I needed to know deep down that I wasn't a tech CEO, right? So I needed to bring somebody into play that was able to grow that part of the business. So we always made sure that was important for us. Wherever we had something to do with customer, we always controlled it very tightly, and then everything else we kind of looked for best approach.
So if we just think about accountability for a second, so you basically you went all in on the pivot from the consulting to technology, and you hired a CTO, you trusted him, he built you the product, and then after the product was launched, what happened?
Don't say this more. I think you're referring to the story we just started before. In July of 2019, we launched the product. Brilliant event. It was in Kakosa. I think we were one of the very last few events that Kakosa hosted, right? We made it very non-HR, right? We had a big LCD screen. Almost was like a concert, and the top 100 heads of HR in Malaysia turned up. Very happy, all this adrenaline pumping. We finished the event. We come back to the office. My CTO hands in his resignation. And he says, look, I can't say no to the offer that has come. And again, I looked at the offer and it was ridiculous, right? It was like 3 times what we were paying him already. And we threw the kitchen sink at him at that time, right? We threw the kitchen sink at him prior to that. But I also have this belief that I never counter offer. right? If you've already come to me and said, look, someone else has given me the offer, I never counter offer. If you start the conversation with me early, say, hey, Sharma, I'm thinking about going out. I think this is the problem. If this was, how much you would be willing to up me, then I'm happy to have that conversation. Right? But if you've already gone through the interview, gotten the offer letter, and then you come to me,
it's too far.
right? Not that this person I could ever afford, but I'm saying anyway, I just don't have this belief, right? But yes, my CTO resigned the day we launched the product. But I think by that time, I was lucky enough, at least by that time, I've had one or two more resignations that really, really hurt. Right, I remember crying for the first week when my first staff resigned because I thought, terrible
We're
boss,
family, right?
Terrible boss. How could I have let this person to resign? Oh my God, what's going to happen of my company? Like this, the first person leaves, everybody's going to leave, and it didn't happen. Okay, touch wood. But you take it on you a lot, right? And by that time when the CTO resigned, and he's still very friendly, very, very cordial. We still have very good relationships. He's now the CTO of a very, very large organization. He left us to join a huge organization, and then after that he moved on to another one. But by that time, I think the cuts were already there that allowed me to understand how to deal with this. My most difficult one was the first resignation. All right. That was painful. I cried in front of the whole office. But anyway, that happened. And then
but accountability. So now he is not accountable for the software
anymore
because
correct.
he's out, and
Yes.
now you are accountable for a software that you don't know the inner workings
Yes.
of. So
Yes.
how do you actually fix that?
Correct. So I think the one lesson I learned there, right, is, and again from football, Zidane said this: nobody is irreplaceable. When people spoke about him after the World Cup, the France '98 World Cup, right? He said this: no one's irreplaceable. And I think if you take that mindset, if you say, look, okay, if you believe your startup journey is a linear way up, then this is a huge fallacy, right? The amount of pits that are going to happen to you is ridiculous. And that's why I think resilience is important. Right? So that was a huge one. Right? But we said, okay, never mind. Already happened. No point crying over spilled milk. Let's figure out what's going to happen. What our CTO did really well, though, and I must commend him for this, was he built a team around the product, right? So it wasn't just him. He built a strong team around that product. So when he left, whilst the leadership in technology wasn't there, the people running the product were still there. So I think we then had to go find leadership in product, and we found that internally. So the person who went on to take on the product environment actually came from internal, right? And she did an amazing job for a long time. And what we realized is, look, whilst the dips will constantly happen, if you just keep pushing on, it doesn't matter, right? Now it's a more fun thing for somebody else to solve. And this person now is willing to stay a little bit longer. And all this kind of stuff. If you are constantly thinking about the next exciting thing to solve, I don't worry too much about this.
During rapid expansion, do you sometimes push the brakes on growing your team, even though you do need more people fast, because you're worried that maybe the last wave have not absorbed your culture yet, and you worry that bringing in too many people too fast would change the culture?
I think the faster, yes. I believe, I don't just believe that, I've seen it happen, right? So when we decided that we were going to be a product company, we grew from about 20 people to 70 people in 6 months.
Wow.
Right? And
do you still remember their names?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think that there is a limit though, right?
50.
Like 50, right?
50. Usually it's 50, right? But because I've always had this behavior of sitting down, hanging out with you, and sometimes people say that's not what bosses need to do.
Do you still have like lunches and dinners with your team?
Oh, yes.
All of the 70 people, or
no. So now we have right-sized.
Optimized.
Optimized the team, right? So now we're about just under 50 people.
Okay.
All right.
So you see, you reversion to the mean. You did
Yeah,
come back
yeah,
down
of
to the
course.
size where you can remember everyone.
Yeah, everybody's new. Yes. But we grew really fast, and a lot of them were just programmers, right? Because we needed to bring out the product very quickly. So some of them were on contract. So even though once you were on contract, or you were an outsourced third party consultant, because it was very difficult to get visas, right? So we had to use whatever means given to us to bring these people. But we said, look, I don't want you to sit in India or Vietnam or wherever. You come into the office, right? I will pay more. I want you in my office. So because then you build a single product with a single vision. So we grew very quickly. At that point, I think what started happening was it became somewhat of a cult persona within different teams, right? That there was this one person who would have things done a certain way, and if you align to that person, you got a lot more opportunities. There was someone else who would do things a different way, and if you align to that person, things were done different. And that started breaking the company a little bit, because then there were pods of people that will fight each other. And whilst we were a HR consulting company, in the midst or in the heat of all these things, you let, sometimes I feel I let things slide, also because I'm conflict averse. I am very conflict averse, right? So I have to take that into my mind as well when dealing with people, when dealing with talent. That's another muscle I think Asians have to build, because we grow up constantly being told
Conflict avoidance.
yes, right? And then suddenly as a leader, you've got to really know how to deal with conflict. And this is something I really had to learn the difficult way. So when you grow too fast, you lose identity very, very fast, right? And you see this slipping from your hands very quickly, right? Then to be able to rein it back in, it becomes very difficult. So never lose sight of the identity. And I think measured growth is always a lot more important than this rapid growth of unsustainable heights and scales. I don't believe that. I'm somewhat a more conservative entrepreneur. Not
Well, you've been 17 years and you achieved product market fit before you started to scale.
Yeah.
But not everyone is so measured. Sometimes you do a hackathon and then you get funded.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have an idea with your friends and you want to try it. And then let's say product market fit is not the best thing and you need to pivot. So I think you didn't need to pivot yet, right?
Yeah.
So if you would need to pivot, how would you do it? Would you just do purely top down, or would you allow, like, you remember the old times when Google had the 1 day a week
10%,
when you can
yeah,
try whatever you want, and some of those actually resulted in great products that we still use today. So how should an entrepreneur manage a pivot from your experience as a consultant? Because I know you haven't done it yourself, but as a consultant, how would you advise me if I needed to pivot to do it?
I think at a company, so when Google did it, they were already, I mean, mind you, we talk about Google as a startup. When they were doing this, there were 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people already, right? So as a 50, 60, 80% startup, I think it is beholden upon the founder to drive that vision. That's what you're there for, right? Ideas can come from anywhere. You cannot stifle the idea, right? That's a terrible thing. If you start stifling ideas because you need to be the one that comes up with the creators of ideas, then you're in big, big trouble. Your ideas must come from somewhere. But the moment we decide that that's an idea we want to drive, whilst we never pivoted, I use this term, expand the aperture, right? We've built products that have come from the ground. We've not thought about it. Our team thought about it. And we went, hang on a minute, that's a brilliant idea. Take it. And then we drive it from leadership, right? Again, I don't think about the business from me as a startup founder. I think about it as a leadership team, right? And we drive it from the leadership team. And once that happens, then there is ownership and accountability, right? And the way I think about this is each one of these layers can no longer be about individuals, because then individuals can come in and go, but the structure stays the same, right? So the leadership team has a set of accountabilities, whoever is in and out. The management team has a set of accountabilities, whoever is in and out, right? And the team have their own accountabilities. So it doesn't matter who is in there. It just matters what the process is and what the outcome for delivery needs to be at each structure for this process. So things that have happened for us is people have come back to us and say, hey, we've gone out, we've done enough work with clients to realize we're missing something here. Here's an MVP that we've done over 3 weekends, just the 3-4 of us. I want to present this to you. And they've presented it to us at management or leadership. We go, hey, brilliant idea. We take that and go into the town hall. And we ask the team to present it and say, this is something we want to work on. This is something, and then we start building the business case for it, the logics for it. And if we say yes, we push it in through the OKR, and off we go. We're doing 2 of that now, right? There are 2 projects that are happening now that adds a significant layer to our product that didn't come from leadership's thinking.
So it sounds like you're trying to achieve collective buy-in before you all embark on this adventure. Is it?
When I say yes, to some extent. I don't believe in management by committee. I don't need everybody to agree to everything that we do. I think that's important.
But at least you need them to understand why
you're
we're doing this.
Yes. Correct. You may agree or disagree with my logic, but you see my logic.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And when you see my logic, and we have this analogy in the office, right? Fight as much as we want, right? Because we've got some very intellectuals in the office, right? So fight all you want.
Do you have any PhDs?
We my God, right? But we also work with a lot of PhDs outside, right? So we say, like, let's argue, let's debate. But once a decision is made, that's the end of the debate. Yeah. Now we go, right? No more debates after that. If we fail, we fail. Nobody turns back and say, you see, I told you so. We figure out what next needs to move, and just keep going, right? So we like to fight, and I think that's important because the fight shows passion. It shows that you believe in something. Accendo doesn't have the problem that people keep quiet. Accendo has the problem people don't keep quiet. Right? So conversations will go on for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours sometimes in a meeting. Right? We need to learn how to stop it. But that gives me insight that you still care. You still want to fight. Right? We'll do that. Once we decide, then we go.
Any final thoughts you would like to share with entrepreneurs? First to entrepreneurs, and then second to the listeners of Soonicorn Nation.
Sure. I think, again, only based on my experience, it is extremely stupid of an entrepreneur to believe that the success the company gets is solely because of the entrepreneur. And I know, and this is my case, there's an entire ecosystem that builds this. There's an adage that says, it takes a village to raise a child. I say it takes a nation to build a startup, right? So if you have this idea that I am great, that's the start of your failure. I think the people you surround yourself with are the ones that are going to determine your success. So the faster you surround yourself with people who are willing to tolerate you for what you lack, but are willing to support for where you want to go, that is the magic sauce for me so far, right? I may change my point of view as we grow, but to me so far, that's been my secret sauce. The people around me who tolerate what I lack, but are willing to support me for where I want to go. So I think to everyone out there who's trying to build what they're trying to build, right? Surround yourself with amazing people. Surround yourself with people that you feel inadequate with when you're in the room. In the Soonicorn room, right? When I turn up, a lot of times I'm very quiet because I'm going, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. And I think that is also the reason why I am strongly a believer of the collective, right? Because the founder's job is a very lonely job, right? You can, as much as we say, yes, the team is important, it's the founder that doesn't sleep at night, right? You and I know we put a very strong smile and a very strong face in front of our team. Only we know the problems that are happening, right? So, and if these problems get across to everyone, it'll break most people, right? Something's not right up there between us, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. But when you have this collective and you come together and you and I are talking about the same problems and we understand that process, you suddenly, psychologically, you feel safe. Yeah. And that psychological safety gives strength to go fight another day. Farhan said this, right? Remember he said when he was going to give up, he had a pool of people who just said, one more day, just one more day, right? I think the collective gives that for us, right? Now, at least for me, it really does give that. But then I think the other thing the collective really does, the Soonicorn Collective really does for all of us, is the exposure that we need. Right, we are now learning bit by bit how to start impacting at a national level, right? And this is important because we start individually. We are doing great things. I think you and Ram spoke about this the last session. Individually, we're already doing great things. I look at the collective like Voltron. I don't know if you watched the cartoon Voltron, right? If we all come together, we're so much more powerful.
And that's actually why I went to Doc and Ram and the rest of the collective, and I suggested this podcast because so many eureka moments, so many learnings, and it was just such a waste that only 20, 30 people are experiencing that. So what would you tell the listeners? How can they keep tuning in, and how can they make the most out of this moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, first and foremost, I think kudos to you, Mo. This idea was all you, right? So coming from wanting to give, I think that
if I saw any resistance, I wouldn't have proceeded.
No. But I think that's what's great, right? The moment you came and said, "Hey, I want to do this," everyone said yes, but you were still the first one who came and said, "I want to do this." So kudos to you for that, right? Tune in if you enjoy it. Give us the feedback. I think look, there's no point in us pretending that this is the right way of doing and we know everything we're doing. So give us as much feedback, I think, as possible. Talk to us. Tell us what you want to hear. We'll be more than happy to bring topics from the public, right? To be able to bring presenters from the public and to be able to see what we can add there. I think this is great.
I would like to remind our listeners that the opinions, views, and content expressed on the Soonicorn Nation podcast are those of the entrepreneurs and guests featured, and do not reflect the official policies or positions of Proficio Consultants, Penjana Capital, or the rest of the Soonicorn Collective. Going alone may be faster, but going together is better. In the early days, attitude matters more than skill, because one can be taught, but the other must be brought. Hope to see you again at Soonicorn Nation.